All right, let's go for a walk, Kenny. I'm not a big fan of the concept, think for yourself. I find a lot of the people who say that aren't deep thinkers on the whole, don't practice deep thinking skills. And there's this other thing about it too. It's like we live in this age of sort of the greed age. It's me, me, me. It's about me. It's about what I want. It's about my needs. It's about, that kind of whole attitude. And how does that play for think for yourself? There's sort of this selfish connotation that it gets attached to that in my mind. So I prefer the idea of thinking critically. And that's what I'm trying to encourage people to do. And in some cases, you may think differently or come to different conclusions. And if you have good reason for that, and if you demonstrate to me evidence and sound reasoning, I may have to change my conclusion, or at least color my conclusion differently, or at the very least take you seriously, regardless of whether we have the exact same conclusion or not. So I'm going to talk to you about thinking critically for the next little while here.
There it is. This is bad news.
My God.
Falling out right now.
Anything could happen. Get on! Wow.
I'll watch the video later. They try mopping this.
One tool you're going to need in order to have critical thinking skills is an ability to understand this thing I call cultural context. And what I mean by cultural context is you are a product of your time and age, the way you were raised, what was going on at that time, what people thought and believed, what was normal, more or less, right? What are your cultural norms? And the idea is to challenge those cultural assumptions when you can, or at least remove them when trying to look at things. So these are things that, of course, I was a philosophy major who studied a lot of theology, and was an art student too, I guess, as well. But kind of the point being that all three of those professors, and the history professor too, Dr. Van Dyke would say the same thing. Harry would say you have to understand the cultural context of the time to really understand history from its proper perspective, or to have a clear view on what the truth of the matter is. Because if you're only looking at it through your cultural lens, you are going to misunderstand. A really easy applicable example would be like, pretend you are from Alabama and you have a cousin in the UK. You never even heard about the United Kingdom before, or Britain, or don't know nothing about it. You just go straight there, and you get there, and chum, your cousin says, nice to meet you. What are you going to do? He says, hey, you want to play some football, mate? And if you say that to him, let's go play some football, what ball do you expect he's going to bring out from his shed to play with you? Right? He's going to get a soccer ball. And you're going to say, no, that's a soccer ball. I said, let's play some football. That's just an easy example of a cultural context, how like what is normal to you isn't normal to every part of the world in time and place. And what makes sense to you, like this is right and the way it should be, is not necessarily the way that other people from different cultures, from different parts of the world who have different climates and different weather conditions and different topography and different basic struggles that they have adapted to, that they have their own way of looking at the world. And it's neither right or wrong necessarily. It's just what it is. And that's the same for you too. So your reaction to other points of view may very well be, how can they think that? Whereas what would be stronger is, why do they think that? And what would be even stronger than that is to add, why do I think what I think? What are the weaknesses or my biases? Things that I don't really challenge, I just assume is true. And it may not necessarily be fully true, and it may not necessarily be untrue either. Because truth isn't necessarily always an exact specific thing. It's sometimes a shade of colors, where specific things are true within it. But from other points of view, from, again, different people's perspectives, right? So be willing to challenge your own perspectives. That's an example of what critical thinking can give to you. So the trick is to kind of have an understanding of how and why you evaluate things the way you do. And hey, look, there's a hair sticking out of my hat. Stupid. So there's a lot of examples of belief systems that are predicated upon misunderstandings of context. I'll give you a glaring, bright example, and some of you may not like this. I could go on about this one for a while, but maybe I'll just keep it short and say there is no rapture in the Bible. It doesn't say that anywhere. Now, maybe it says that in your version, but your version isn't the same version that existed almost 2,000 years ago, 1,700 years ago, and whatnot, as they're putting it together. So first of all, it's been translated many times, and each time it was translated, it lost context and lost understanding. And when it says in 2 Timothy, in the original Greek text, which people of the time would understand it to mean, what it described was, now I'm not saying this is going to happen, or I believe this necessarily, but nonetheless, I'm scholarly able to express it, is that when a dignitary would come from Rome, or a Caesar or a general, something to that effect, everybody would come out of the city and usher them in and welcome them in, kind of line up along the way, kind of like the example of Jesus is riding the donkey and everyone lines up outside and ushers him in. That's what the original words describe. But as you take translation after translation after translation, and it changes and changes and changes, and your understanding changes, and somehow about 150 years ago, or slightly more, this understanding became that we're all going to float away from this evil material earth. And if you understand ancient biblical understanding, what the people of the time understood and believed, they believed in the resurrection of life on earth, not this float away to heaven stuff that we understand now. So we've lost context in one example there, and I can go on about that for hours. I mean, there's so many examples of this. But so why do you believe what you believe? You just think it's normal, you just think it's true, but you're a product of your time, of your age, of your culture, and the information that's available to you. So is what I think true? Is someone going to benefit if I buy into something I'm being told? Is that person necessarily going to be me? Is there motivations that people have that are questionable, even when the people themselves mean well? Are they themselves a victim to cultural context? These are the kind of questions you want to start asking if you're trying to engage in critical thinking. Oh my God, man down from the weather storm. Oh boy, poor tree there. Weather storm just fucking hammered it. Yeah, that could be you. Okay, come on, Ken. You're at the frog in the bog. Your tree's been hammered by a windstorm, friends. It's like, it's not Christmas anymore anyways, so I'm sure it's no problem. So if there's like a wide set of cultural or assumptions or beliefs of your time, recognize that just because they are there doesn't mean they're bad, and it doesn't mean they're good either. I can give you two examples. It is widely believed, get this, people widely agree and believe, no matter who they are, the vast majority of Canadians agree that murder is wrong, that it's a crime. Yeah, and seems like a no-brainer, doesn't it? Seems like a no-brainer. Okay, right? So there's an example of cultural context where everyone comes to a conclusion that is reasonable and makes sense. And then there's other examples where people all think the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're right. And then I'll have people say to me, think for yourself. And then their solution is to kind of jump right to a player who's telling them what to think without doing the hard work themselves of dissecting information, ideas, words, perspectives, and trying to come together with a package that gives you a wider or a wise view of things. That's your ultimate goal, I hope, is wisdom, I thought, but it turns out that a lot of people don't care about wisdom. While we have all the tools in the world available to us, and it's not just that they aren't capable of it, I mean, they just flat out don't care. They have the ability to find truth or to cling on to truth, to find fact, and they refuse to engage in it as a matter of, easier to turn on the comedy and ha 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 and laugh. And those guys are stupid. So the big one is to discover when is the crowd right and when is the crowd wrong, and try to let that flavor you. Just because everyone thinks a certain way doesn't mean everyone's right, or doesn't mean everyone's wrong. Each situation, each individual thing requires a bit of interpretation, a bit of thought put into it. Here in Wells, all we got is time to read and think. Still melting around here, but it's getting closer. It's getting nicer out. Other sets of bias would be an example of confirmation bias, which is when you seek out information you already agree with, and it helps you double down on your perspective. And then also it narrows your perspective or your ability to see other things that may be true. So this thing called confirmation bias would be an example of you have a perspective on medical science, but you get all your perspectives from a YouTuber or someone on social media, on X or whatever. They say blah, 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 and you say, that sounds reasonable. And, I think that too, I guess. A great example was a short I made last week where I said that, this widely held belief that just because someone says they're going to cut taxes, does that mean it necessarily affects you positively? And the example I gave was holes in the road by my house, saying that, the district will fix those. But if the district said, we're not going to fix that stuff anymore, you have to fix it, the $50 I would have saved in property tax on the tax cut won't cover the repair to the road, let alone other services that are offered in town. If that cost is offloaded onto me, it doesn't necessarily make, healthcare being a great example, right? If I'm responsible for my own healthcare financially and whatnot, I probably couldn't afford any coverage or any help whatsoever. That's why I've never been able to get good dental work done, because until recently you couldn't get good dental work done. But it's this widely held belief that lower taxes, well, the thing is, most of those tax cuts go to people in a wealth bracket far above you, goes to corporations and things like that. And then the costs end up getting offloaded onto you in the long run. But everyone just widely thinks that when a politician says, I'm going to make tax cuts, and Carney's no different, Polyev, they both say the same thing, make tax cuts. That's never been something that's benefited people like myself who are at the bottom of the socioeconomic situation in Canada. It's never benefited me to have my taxes cut, because my taxes are so low anyways, and the value of what I get back from them is so high. Sure, I'd love to see a little less GST and PST. Let's not talk about that. That's different. Sure, seeing the price of gas go down and help me. Yeah, but that's not usually what they mean by tax cuts. But everyone just sort of buys this idea. Yay, tax cut equals good. And when I made it short saying that, the reaction was very hostile, because people so deeply believe this, so ideologically believe it, that nothing that I can say reason-wise or perspective-wise are a lot of people going to be willing to listen to, unless they've already understood how economics works, or how trickle-down economics doesn't work. So, these assumptions are very normal, and and then the hostility to them, and then basically People don't really have an argument half the time back for what I say. They just get mad because, and they're like, well, you're a this, you're a that, which is a shortcut to thinking itself. So that's my challenge for you is consider other perspectives. Doesn't mean you have to agree or like them, but at least be willing to hear them. And I'm willing to hear yours if you're not being hostile or rude or calling me names or, I'm open to viewpoints. If you can genuinely prove me wrong, right on. I corrected myself at times over the years. I try to minimize that by having accurate information, by thinking critically about the content I'm going to make, by having a wide perspective that's built on many things, not just what sounds the easiest, a slogan or whatever. Okay, everyone, hit like, share, subscribe. Thanks for coming on by. I do my best for you. Take care now.